Hello everyone and welcome to today's WorkSafe Tasmania Month webinar, Psychological Hazards in the Australian Construction Industry Interview Findings. I'm Stephanie Morawski from WorkSafe Tasmania and I will be your moderator. Before we start, please take a moment to read the following slide about information received today. I'll now explain how you can participate in today's webinar. Please use the questions window on your control panel to type and submit questions at any time during today's webinar. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Only presenter webcams will be used and today's webinar is being recorded. I would now like to introduce your presenter, Dr Carol Hon. Carol is a Senior Lecturer and Research Fellow at the School of Architecture and Built Environment, Faculty of Engineering at Queensland University of Technology. Carol has a quantity surveying background and has been a construction safety and health researcher for more than 12 years. Carol has expertise in tackling safety and health problems with interdisciplinary researchers using qualitative and quantitative methods. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for having me today. Today, I'm going to share with you my research project. The title of my presentation is Psychosocial Hazards in the Australian Construction Industry Interview Findings. This is my presentation outline. First of all, I'll introduce you some background of my project, and I'll share with you the latest interview findings, and finally, I'll give you a conclusion. The presentation today is based on a bigger DECRA project, which is Discovery for Early Career Research Award project funded by the Australian Research Council. The title of that project being Improving Mental Health and Safety in the Construction Industry. This is my research team. I'm the project leader, and I work together with Associate Professor Bo Shah and my PhD student Chen Jun Yan Sun, and two organizational psychologists, Professor Larina Jamieson and Dr. Kirsten Wei. The project started in mid-2019, and so far we've completed the interview stage, and we are currently undertaking a survey to collect more data. And the project published two publications, the first one being a meta-analysis on the relationship between psychosocial hazards and mental health in the construction industry in the journal Safety Science, and the other being a conference paper in the CIBW 99. If you're interested, feel free to check out these two publications. So let me share with you some background information of the research I've been doing. How serious is the mental health and safety issues in construction? According to the report, in Australia, the suicide rates of construction workers were 84% higher than the non-construction workers in Australia. And Australian construction workers were 6 times more likely to die by suicide than from a workplace accident. Suicide and related behavior in the Australian construction industry is estimated to cost $1.57 billion a year. Why should construction companies care about mental health and safety of their employees? Basically, mental health is an important workplace health and safety issue. Companies, including construction companies, are legally required to provide psychologically and physically healthy and safe work environment for their employees. Mental health would definitely affect physical health and safety of the employees, and statistics shows that psychological distress would lead to more workplace accidents. And there's a business case for why construction companies should care about mental health and safety of their employees, because poor mental health would affect the productivity of the employees. Poor mental health employees tend to have higher level of absenteeism and presenteeism, and about $11 billion a year is lost in Australia due to poor mental health condition of employees. And about $146 million a year is paid out in workers' compensation claims for poor mental health. So why construction industry has such a great problem of mental health issues? This can tie back to the nature of the construction industry. Basically, construction industry is very physically demanding, male-dominated. Women only account for about 10 to 11% in the construction industry, and around 90% are male. And the culture is very strong macho culture, tough guy culture. They don't tend to open up themselves to talk about mental health problem. They don't want to seem to be solved. And the construction industry is very transient. The labor force is very temporary, and they are most likely project-based. Many construction practitioners, they have drug or alcohol problem that will affect their mental health. So such a work environment cultivates a high level of psychosocial hazards or risk that would adversely affect mental health of the construction workforce. According to Workplace Health and Safety Queensland, the most frequent psychosocial hazards leading to mental health disorder claims are work pressure, exposure to workplace violence, and workplace bullying. This project aims to identify the psychosocial hazards and risk factors in the construction industry. And the research method of this project being 33 interviews conducted in Queensland. They are all construction industry practitioners, and they all have site-based experience. Now let me share with you some of my interview findings. From the 33 interviews I've conducted, 13 of them were site-based supervisory staff, and another 20 of them were tradesmen, workers, and apprentices. So here I summarized 9 key psychosocial hazards. They are not the exhaustive list, but I would like to highlight these 9 in today's presentation. They are role overload, interpersonal conflict, role ambiguity, lack of support, lack of praise and recognition, low job control, high cognitive demand, high emotional demand, and job insecurity. We'll go through them one by one. Regarding role overload, most of the interviewees just accept role overload being part of their job. That's the norm of the construction industry. They would not be surprised if they are in the condition of role overload. And they highlight 2 main factors leading to the role overload condition. The first being time pressure, the second being excessive workload. When they were asked to describe what did time pressure look like to them, they talk about long working hours, and they describe their work to being a normal day would be 12 hours per day and 6 days per week. And they talk about why that's the case, because the construction industry is very competitive and they operate in a very thin profit margin with limited resources that require the workers to work really long working hours. And they also mentioned the time pressure comes from tight deadlines and schedules. They use the terminology to describe their deadlines and schedules like competing, extreme, ambitious, unrealistic, unachievable, never long enough, poor, and tight. So these explain or demonstrates how tight being the deadlines and schedules are. Regarding excessive workload, they keep mentioning unrealistic time frame and insufficient workforce. They describe the condition being a lot of physical work, getting pushed to get the job done, too many responsibilities to handle, high expectation, always try to meet those targets, squeezing their role and responsibilities into a 12-hour day, and work on multiple projects. The next psychosocial hazards I would like to share is the interpersonal conflict. The interviewees identified 3 sources of interpersonal conflict from co-workers, from stakeholders or clients, and from supervisors. Regarding conflict with co-workers, the interviewees relate it back to the industry culture. The industry culture being male egos, metro culture, and when site-based workers, when they communicate, they express that very often there is a lot of aggression, and they also describe some of these guys come from a background where they're not particularly interested in making other people feel comfortable, and they don't understand those sorts of concepts, and they're quite abrupt and quite hard. So this also demonstrates what is currently the culture in the construction industry that may lead to conflict among co-workers. The second source of the interpersonal conflict is with stakeholders and client, and that's the typical scenario in the construction industry, in the construction project, when a project begins, an ad hoc project team comes from different companies are pulled together temporarily to work on that project, and they are from different companies with different values, different practices, and these stakeholders, they come together for that project with completing interests. So if they haven't worked together before in any previous projects, it's common that they do not trust each other, and trust has to be built gradually. And all these create the precondition for interpersonal conflict. And another source of interpersonal conflict is with supervisors. The interviewees described the relationship with supervisors being disrespect, abuse, or sometimes even bully. And they described, some of the interviewees described their supervisors being extremely demanding, and that was because the supervisors, they were under the pump to deliver the project on time and on schedule, which was extremely hard. And they sometimes pass on the stress to their subordinates. And supervisors, they are very good at technical knowledge and skills, but not all of them would have good people management and leadership skills. So when they try to supervise the subordinates, interpersonal conflict would arise. Regarding role ambiguity, most of the interviewees express that their roles are quite clear and they know what they should do. But when we ask for further clarification, they reflect that the actual duties of the site-based roles are sometimes not very well defined, because when you're on site, you've got to make things happen, and you've got to expand your normal duty to make things happen. If someone hasn't done that part of the job, you've got to pick it up and do it. And on site, there's always unexpected tasks due to dynamic site situation. They do explain that the longer they work in the industry, the longer they have more experience, they are more clearer about the role, and they know what they have to do and how to let the project progress. But they did explain that people working on site really need to have a flexible and positive mindset to keep the project on progress. The next psychosocial hazards I would like to share is the lack of support. Interviewees talk about lack of support from supervisors, from the co-workers, from the companies. For interviewees who were apprentices, they would expect to have more support from their supervisors because they've just started in the industry and they're learning. They really rely on their supervisors to tell them what to do, and they would be in distress if they cannot receive the right amount of support they need, and they would be in difficult situation if they are not offered the opportunity to learn, but to actually do the work by themselves. And some of the interviewees expressed limited support to perform new tasks when they are assigned to do something new that requires a steep learning curve. They would really need the supervisors or companies to provide the support to help them to get through that steep learning curve. And some interviewees express that when they work in remote construction site, there's not much support from the company or the supervisor or people around them. And this is also the case for some trades that would work in isolation in small projects. For example, plumbing and electricians, they do not have a big crew, and in small jobs, they may be just on their own. And I would also like to share the psychosocial hazard lack of praise and recognition. About half of the interviewees, they agree that their contributions are being valued by the company and the supervisors, but about another half expressed that they didn't have much praise and recognition from the company and the supervisors that they're working with. And most of the time, the praise and recognition will be in the form of verbal appreciation, but most likely they will have a yearly appraisal to talk about their job performance, and that's the only chance probably they'll get praise and recognition. And nearly all of the interviewees accept that they're not getting much praise and recognition, and that's fine for them. Here they described, that's your job, you're meant to do it. It's nice when they notice, but if they don't, then so what? So they basically accept, yeah, that's the job they need to do, but it's okay if they don't get any praise and recognition. And surprisingly, some interviewees expressed that they actually highly value the praise and recognition from their co-workers. And here we have one example. I have had fellow workmates recognize and praise me, which I suppose means more than anything else. So praise and recognition doesn't necessarily come from senior management or the supervisors, but it would be equally good if construction workers, site project teams, they can receive feedback and praise and recognition from coworkers. And they also describe when would they receive compliment or praise and recognition from the supervisors or senior management is only when they can save money for the project. Very realistic, save money, and sometimes they sacrifice their personal time, they work overtime to achieve great outcomes for the project. They will get recognition as well. Talking about no job control, the interviewees identify that there are lots of areas that they can't control, especially when they are site-based workers or supervisors. For example, they do not have control over their work schedule, their work shift. The hours are out of their control. If they are asked to stay longer in the construction site to complete the work, then they have to stay on. For example, they have to finish the concrete pour for the day before they can go, and they can't just go home before the job is being finished. And sometimes when they have to work on different shifts, the management would probably not communicate the next work shift early enough to them, and they really can't have much control about their work shift. And resource control, that's also something that they don't usually have control over. Here we have an example. There's only one crane, so everybody wants the crane at the same time all the time. So being site team practitioners on site, they have no control over the resources that the company assigned to them or they have access to. And they have to work around what they have in terms of resources to achieve the job. And they also have no control over weather and environment, but their job really rely heavily on the weather condition and the project environment. For example, the trade of roofing or concreting, which would be severely affected by bad weather, but that they don't have any control over. And the site team can not have probably very limited control over company policy and the contract as well. They have no say over what the project they have to work on, but just to accept that this is the project that the company has, and they will rotate to that project. And they have no control over who they would work together with, who are the labor of the company, and how they're being paid, how the company policies are structured. Regarding high cognitive demand, 24 interviewees out of 33 agree that they experienced high cognitive demand for their role, and they have to pay full attention to the task that they undertake because of mainly two reasons: safety and financial. For safety concerns, if they do not pay full attention to the job, they either would hurt themselves or they would hurt others. For financial implications, here we have an example. If you miss a line item, your scope of work is incorrect because you weren't focusing, and then that actually costs you real money. That's really the case when contract administrators are preparing for variation or for some other payment. These items would have huge financial implications, and when the site team undertakes these activities, they've got to pay full attention, and the job requires high cognitive demand. The next psychosocial hazards I would like to talk about is the high emotional demand. Interviewees talk about they have to deal with demanding clients, and the clients' requirements are always changing and increasing. It's hard to cope with, and they have to deal with difficult subcontractors or for variation and payment. Sometimes they need to argue and to get what they want. And if they are working in remote construction site, they're basically in isolation away from their family and friends, and that also gives them emotional toll. Finally, is the job insecurity. Interviewee 9, who was a fly-in, fly-out project manager, shared his experience. During COVID-19, he had to demobilize over 600 workers when the project was stopped because of COVID-19. He described that was the source of stress in the construction industry, especially for construction workers. And he, being the project manager, he also experienced lots of stress when he had to tell his fellow workers the bad news. And he also explains that even permanent labor in a construction company is more or less still project-based, because if the company does not have incoming new jobs, then the company cannot continue, and they have to lay off the workers. So job insecurity is being one of the sources of stress. So that's the 9 key psychosocial hazards that I would like to cover in this presentation. To give you a conclusion, mental health of the construction workforce is an important occupational health and safety issue. And the interview findings of my research shows that psychosocial hazards in the construction industry really needs to be managed, really needs to be addressed. And the 9 key psychosocial hazards that I shared today, they're not exhaustive, but they are frequently mentioned by the interviewees. And I hope this research and the presentation today can contribute to creating a psychologically healthy and safe environment for our construction workforce. The project is still ongoing, and at the moment I'm collecting survey data. The survey targets site-based construction industry practitioners in Australia, in any part of Australia. So if you are site-based supervisors or you manages a project team on site, highly encourage you to share with us your opinion. You can scan the QR code and put in the password to complete a 10-minute questionnaire survey. And for every completed survey, the research team will contribute $1 to the Amazing Construction or Lifeline or beyond blue on the respondent's behalf. So when you complete the survey, you're also supporting mental health in the construction industry. And your opinion would help to form future policies and improve industry practice. That's all for my presentation today. Any questions would be welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol, for your presentation. So if anyone does have any questions of our presenter today, Dr Carol Hon from the Queensland University of Technology, please do use the control panel to type and submit those questions. So Carol, a couple of your slides had a notation of N values. Are you able to just explain to our audience what an N value means?
That's the number. So altogether, I conduct 33 interviews, and it's just a number of interviewees that expressed that opinion.
Okay, thank you. Which of the hazards which you spoke about are the most prominent ones, and which hazard do you think is the most severe, or one that a construction company should focus on?
The first two included in my presentation, they are more prevalent and they are more frequently mentioned, role overload and interpersonal conflict. So the interviewees, all of them keep mentioning they have long working hours, they're under time pressure, they have excessive workload, and they have to be flexible to pick up the works on site, and interpersonal conflict with coworkers, with supervisors, with their clients and other stakeholders. So
All right,
that's
thank you,
probably the
Carol.
top.
All right. So your research, or the research findings, spoke about the Queensland construction industry. Have you or the university conducted any research with construction companies outside of Australia, and how do those findings compare?
This project is funded by the Australian Research Council, and the target is construction industry practitioners in Australia. But I myself and my collaborators have conducted research in other places like Hong Kong and China. So if interested, please search for my name. The publications are on QT ePrints.
Thank you, Carol. What can regulators do to support construction companies?
I think the Workplace Health and Safety Queensland and the regulator in other places like WorkSafe Tasmania all have been doing a lot of things very recently, and I realized that in New South Wales they are having new guidelines and practice to recommend how to assess psychosocial hazards. And I think there's a new space for the construction industries to incorporate in their HR policies. So at the moment, I think this is the area that probably can put more effort. No doubt that mental health is an important issue in the construction industry, but how to systematically identify the psychosocial hazards at a company level in every construction site, that's something that is awaiting to be tackled, I think, in the construction industry.
All right, thanks, Carol. Your presentation mentioned low perceived control. Was this just team members or leaders as well?
Those interviewees, they are site-based supervisors and workers, so we are not surprising that they do not have much control over a lot of things, because they are people on the front line. They are people on tools. So there are so many other things that they have to accept that's the project, that's the work environment they're in. So that's understandable. They don't have much control over a lot of things.
All right, thank you. How did you determine which hazards were the key ones?
We count the number of times being mentioned by the interviewees, and we also count the number of interviewees mentioned that psychosocial hazards. So when we do the coding, we did a thematic analysis according to the job demand and resources model, and we count the number of times that each individual mentioned and how many individual mentioned the same thing.
Thank you, Carol. Why is so much of the data referenced? Why is it so old from, for example, from 2014 to up to 2017?
I guess that's the time that, that's the beginning of the time that mental health issue in the construction industry is being more recognized. And Mason Construction, they did lots of research on that. But there are more recent ones. Yeah, I just not I haven't included them, but there are more recent ones.
Thank you, Carol. Are you able to let us know if research of this kind can further add to advocacy towards wider reform regarding work health and safety legislation, particularly in lieu of psychological risks that can arise in the workforce, and how best to respond to risk of this kind?
Not sure I understand the question. Can you clarify or repeat that?
Yes, I'll repeat the question. Do you know if research of this kind can further advocate towards wider reform regarding work health and safety legislation?
Mm-hmm. I think this research justifies how the industry, those people in the front line, how they feel, and that really helps the regulators and even safety managers of construction companies, that they understand how these people feel and come up with a tailor-made or more fine-grained policy to really address these problems. So in the interview findings, we identify role overload and interpersonal conflict being the top two psychosocial hazards. Then the company can possibly channel more resources to target these two when they want to improve the mental health conditions of the employees.
Thank you, Carol. Just to conclude, actually, sorry, a few more questions coming through, but if you were just able to repeat how people can find out more about your research findings.
You can Google my name, Carol Hon ePrints, QUT ePrints. Yeah, you can see all the publications available and can freely download.
All right, thanks, Carol. A question: How can companies and other stakeholders provide a better psychological climate for workers?
I guess it's similar to safety climate, although it is about safety climate is about physical health and safety, but psychological, psychosocial safety climate is more about our mental health well-being. It requires commitment from the management, and it requires proper assessment of the psychosocial hazards and so forth.
All right, thank you. And are you happy for us, just in closing, Carol, to send to today's attendees the flyer and links that you have included in your presentation?
Definitely, that would be awesome.
All right, fantastic.
Yeah. And I want
All
to
right.
encourage anyone appropriate to participate in the survey or circulate to your network.
Fantastic, and we can certainly include that information in correspondence that we send out. So thank you very much to today's presenter, Dr. Carol Hon from the Queensland University of Technology, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Psychosocial Hazards in the Australian Construction Industry, Interview Findings. Following today's webinar, you will receive a survey on today's presentation. We do appreciate you providing us with your feedback. Today's webinar has also been recorded and will be made available following WorkSafe Tasmania Month on WorkSafe Tasmania's YouTube page. To find out more about WorkSafe Tasmania Month or other initiatives funded by the WorkCover Tasmania Board delivered by WorkSafe Tasmania, please head to worksafe.tas.gov.au. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone. Bye.